Idaho Matters is brought to you in part by St. Luke's Pharmacy, now offering free home delivery. For daily medications or one time prescriptions, home delivery is easy to set up. It's convenient and safe. St. Luke's Pharmacy, now delivering to your doorstep. Information on how to get started at stlukesonline.org.
So you can't see this, but hopefully you can hear it. Behind every Boise State Public Radio podcast is a team working hard to bring you stories that matter. So if you value podcasts like this one, please support them. Hit donate at boisestatepublicradio.org. Thanks.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. Idaho, get ready for some exciting science because tomorrow, an experiment from Boise State University is headed into orbit. However, this isn't your typical piece of cargo because it's made of engineered structures that are designed to imitate human bones, complete with living cells, which will help researchers to understand how microgravity impacts our bodies and whether something as simple as vibration can counteract its effects. So joining us now from the Kennedy Space Center, where launch preparations are currently underway, are senior research scholar and lead scientist on the ISS project, as well as Dr. Gunush Ozer, associate professor at the Mechanical and Biomedical Engineering Department and the director of Mechanical Adaptations Laboratory and principal investigation on the ISS project. I want to welcome both of you, and Dr. Sean Howard, I only gave your title out, so welcome as I say your name too.
Thanks.
Hi, Gemma.
So
Thank
let
you
me
for having
begin.
us.
So good to have both of you here. So, Dr. Howard, let me begin with you. Can you tell us a bit more about what is being sent to the International Space Station?
Yeah, we are taking mesenchymal stem cells, which are the progenitor cells that are primarily found in your bone marrow that can differentiate to become different tissues such as bone, fat, muscle, or cartilage. And so we are taking those and we are encapsulating them into a hydrogel, which will mimic the soft internal structure of your bone marrow. And then we also have those surrounding a 3D printed bioscaffold that will mimic the harder trabecular structures within your bones. So the idea is, like you said, to mimic the internal structure of your bone marrow. And then with these stem cells, we can apply low intensity vibrations to try to mimic the forces that your body experiences when you exercise to see if that can stimulate that bone production pathway in microgravity.
So, Dr. Ozer, we often hear that astronauts lose bone density during long missions. How serious of a problem is this?
Yeah, so it is actually an astronaut would lose about 10 times faster compared to a person that is 50 years old on Earth. So basically, they can lose up to 20% of their bone mass when the mission is over, right? So that means it's a serious problem because if you're an astronaut and you're trying to stand up, right after you landed Mars, for example, so it could be issues with fractures, balance, and things like that, right?
So these samples, my understanding is that they're designed to represent both young and let's call them older bones. Dr. Ozer, what are you hoping to learn by comparing the two?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question because one of the things that we were interested in initially is when you're aged, you go to the gym the same amount of time that you do when you're younger, but you don't make enough bone and muscle. And a similar problem also happens with astronauts. They kind of exercise up to 2 hours a day at the space station, but despite that, they still lose bone and muscle. So the one question, that possibility, was that the cells become less sensitive to mechanical forces when you age or when you're under microgravity. But the other possibility is that because the bone microenvironment also changes when you age, or when you're in microgravity for a long time. So by sending these different microstructured bones, one representing young, one representing old, we are kind of trying to understand if the microenvironment of bone has any bearing on how cells respond to the mechanical challenge.
So when you say longer missions, Dr. Ozar, can you kind of explain what you mean by that? Because we just, had astronauts in space, but I would assume that would not be considered a long mission.
It's not. So traditionally with the space station, astronauts usually stay there for 6 months or so. And that's the most of the data that we have from humans or animals that, the longest missions that we have recorded. There's a couple missions that actually try to push this boundary and then have astronauts stay at space like a year. But for a typical journey to Mars, it will expect it to take about 3 years, right? So you're going to go there. That will be a year, and then they will go around the Mars for a year before they start to land. So for an astronaut who's going to Mars now, they will be exposed to microgravity conditions up to 3 years. And we just don't know how that long of a microgravity does to the bones, to be honest.
So, Dr. Howard, you mentioned vibration, and it's really interesting, this part of the experiment, and it's the use of this low intensity vibration. So how does vibration influence bone health and stem cells?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's an essential part of this experiment. And so that's actually the primary subject that we study in the lab, is how mechanical forces affect the ability for these stem cells to become those different tissues that I mentioned before. So bone, fat, muscle, or cartilage. And one of the ways that they sense the activity level of your body as an organism is through these protein complexes, which can actually detect strain or vibration that's being placed on the cell. So when you exercise, when you're running, when you're lifting weights, or even just the normal force of gravity here on Earth, those forces get transmitted through the cell and can actually turn on genes, which in these stem cells, which then make them become a bone-producing cell, such as an osteoblast, or a fat-producing cell. If they lose those signals, they become more fat-productive and adipocyte. And so that's how we study these forces, is by applying vibration or applying strain, and then seeing the outcome of what the cells become later on once they're differentiated.
So, Dr. Howard,
we know. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. So we know the forces that the body experiences when you exercise, and so that's what we're trying to mimic with these low intensity vibrations.
Okay, so then can you walk us through how the experiment will be conducted once it reaches the International Space Station? I mean, is it all automated? Will astronauts be involved? Walk us through this.
Yeah, that's also a great question. So I grew the cells in our lab in Boise State University and encapsulated them in the hydrogels. And then we shipped them here to Kennedy Space Center. And then over the last couple of days, we've been assembling them into these automated devices called a Cube Lab, which will maintain the temperature and the growth media. And it contains the hardware for the vibration device. And so it'll be a fully automated system that we package everything together, and then once it's sent to the space station, the astronauts just plug it into a power supply unit there, and it will run its automated program where it delivers the low intensity vibrations for 20 minutes a day, 2 times 20 minutes every day. And then at the end of 21 days for the full length of the experiment, it will be washed with a saline solution, and then some fixative reagents will be pushed through to get a snapshot of how the cells are at that period of time. And then it'll be stable. They'll be put at refrigerated temperature until they're able to come back down. But we're essentially locking it in as a snapshot in time of what the cells are experiencing at the end of that 21-day experiment. But the idea is it's all automated, so there will be no hands-on applications needed once it's up on the space station.
So then once that data comes back to Earth, how will researchers on the ground access and start analyzing this the information you've collected?
Yeah, so we will take the cells, we'll extract the RNA, so we can look at the expression of genes through collection of the messenger RNA to see which genes are actively being transcribed in the cells. And then we have them fixed for live cell or for fluorescent imaging. So we can use antibodies to tag the outside of the cell and see, or as well the inside of the cell. So we'll use fluorescent microscopy to be able to see the structure of those protein complexes that I mentioned before, and we'll be able to measure the morphology of the cell, because that also is how we determine the cell type that these stem cells then become. We can also detect the expression of calcium. So as these stem cells become these osteoblasts, these bone producing cells, they secrete calcium. So we can use a calcium stain and see where there are these mineral deposits as an indication that the cells are becoming those bone producing cells. We can also take any of the DNA out and look at structural changes to the DNA. So we have a variety of techniques that we can use to assay exactly what's going on internally at the cellular level.
So, Dr. Ozero, you mentioned, the goal to get to Mars, and that would take about 2 to 3 years to do that. So, how critical is this research to eventually help astronauts, stay healthier during a really long mission, like going to Mars?
Right. Thank you for the question. So, well, basically, we know collectively that the space changes our bodies to look like little bit more aging. So it's like space causes accelerated aging, but we don't really know at the molecular level what are the similarities between aging and space travel. So with this experiment, we can now actually compare the experiments that we do on Earth and also compare them to the age cells that we will be able to say what are the similarities in molecular structures, right? When we look at these cells. And the second thing that we've been working in our lab for the last 10 years shows that vibrations that we apply can actually push these mesenchymal stem cells into more bone-making phenotypes. So we are also hoping that this research will lead use of vibration in some sense to supplement the exercise or other pharmacological protocols that astronauts use.
So, Dr. Ozair, could these findings eventually benefit people here on Earth that won't be going to space? I mean, I'm thinking of things like, as you mentioned, aging, osteoporosis, bone loss. So could there potentially be benefits in this research, for everyone?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, exactly. So the reason that we send these cells to space really actually to mimic the aging process in kind of in the cell culture mechanism. Usually, if you want to do an aging experiment, you need to get an animal and age them in time, right? Which takes years and which is more costly and time consuming. So by sending them to space to age them in about 21 days, we are really trying to find ways. Hey, can we ask these aging questions in space? And is it a good place to answer these questions? So technically, if this experiment is a success, then we might have an accelerated aging platform that we can use to, ask age-related questions that help people on Earth. And similarly, use of vibrations during aging is something that we like to do on Earth as well.
So, Dr. Howard, my understanding is BSU students were able to help a lot to develop this project. What kind of opportunities has this given them, in your opinion, to really participate in this real-world space research?
Yeah, it's been really exciting having students in the lab working on it, and I mean, it's also one of the pleasures of the job is seeing that joy in their eyes too, as they're actually working on something they'll go to space. So we've had a master's student who designed the hydrogel portion of it. So trying to mimic the internal structures of the bone marrow, we need to know what the stiffness of that structure is. Also designing the 3D printed scaffolds that are mimicking the bone parts. So those were master students projects. And then we've also had students developing some of the mechanical forces. So the vibration device, had students design, had to optimize how the actuator that's providing the vibration, how that's designed and implemented into the cube lab that the cells are grown in. So that was a major challenge, trying to isolate where the vibrations are taking place and controlling them so that we know we're getting the right vibration amplitude and frequency that we desire. And then we also have students optimizing the how it all comes together. So and interpreting the analysis, we'll have students working on the RNA extraction and the RNA expression parts of the post-experiment analysis project too.
And before we wrap up today, you will be having a watch party for the launch. So, Dr. Howard, can you just tell us about this, when and where all of this will take place so folks can see this happen in real time?
Yeah, so that will be taking place tomorrow at, I believe it starts at 4 p.m. locally and 5 p.m. Locally in Boise time. Thank you. Getting my time zones mixed up. So it'll be at the Harry Morrison Civil Engineering building on the engineering side of campus in Boise State University, where the machine shop is located. And so there will be a TV, and there will be one of the master students who worked on this project will be there to answer questions, and we'll have a slideshow with a bunch more detailed information about the project and what's going up to space. And then we'll have some other members of the lab there too to help answer questions. And we have a resident astronaut at Boise State as well, Steve Swanson, who will give a presentation about Idaho research in space and his experiences as an astronaut. So that'll be really exciting to get some firsthand knowledge of what it's like going into space.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much for taking time to talk with us about all of this. We've been speaking with Dr. Ganesh Ozair and Dr. Sean Howard about Boise State's upcoming space mission and how this research could help scientists better understand bone health in space and here on Earth. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. If this podcast has become a part of your routine, can you tap 5 stars and leave us a review? It helps us stand out.
Every day on Up First, NPR's Golden Globe-nominated morning news podcast, we bring you 3 essential stories. At the heart of each story are questions. What really happened? What really mattered? What happens next? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious and to follow the facts. Follow Up First wherever you get your podcasts and start your day knowing what matters and why.